Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm very happy to have Jesse Nieminen with me today. He's the co-founder of an idea and innovation management system called Viima, and today we're going to be talking about how all types of companies can improve their success rate with innovation. Jesse, it's wonderful having you with us.
My pleasure, Nick.
So for people who don't know about Viima, could you just let us know quickly what type of work do you guys do?
Sure. As you mentioned, our main business is providing companies with an innovation management platform that they can use to engage their stakeholders of their organization in innovation. So that usually that's employees, but often it can also be the customers or partners of the company. And basically, they leave ideas on the platform, and then we help the company manage those ideas, pick the right ones, and track the value that they get out of those, and making sure that they are able to kind of like improve the whole process. So that's basically the gist of it. And obviously, we try to work closely with our customers to ensure that they actually get value out of innovation. So we do help them quite a bit with that kind of topics as well.
Absolutely. It's something that a lot of companies have been looking into, especially in the last couple of years. And I'm sure we'll get into a bit more detail about the system shortly. But I'm quite interested to find out your story. What's your background, and how did you get interested in this topic of innovation management? How did you sort of get the idea of developing this system?
Sure. I guess briefly about the background of our founding team. So we're all we basically met during our studies at the Helsinki University of Technology here in Finland, and we were computer science and students who also took a bit of business and innovation studies on the side, and we were really excited about using software to kind of like boost innovation. After having worked in the industry for a few years, we thought it would be cool to create a company of our own, and we didn't actually have an idea when we first started. So we then came up with this idea together with some like pilot customers of ours, that it would be cool to engage customers in the development process of new businesses and new concepts. So we started from there, and then kind of like iteratively built the platform with the help of our pilot customers, and eventually we figured out that the biggest pain points that most companies have is actually around the larger management of innovation, and not just in kind of like getting those incremental pieces of feedback regarding something that you're doing. It's certainly really useful, but a lot of the ideas and thoughts are actually usually already within the organization. So it's kind of like often easier to start from there than having this two-dimensional conversation.
Yeah, a lot of the feedback that I often get from clients about these innovation management platforms is they don't have any lack of people willing to give ideas, but they get very frustrated when nothing seems to happen after the ideas have been given, either during whatever contest they're running or whatever system they've got in place. So if you want to sort of tell us a bit more about the management aspect that you touched on, I think that'd be very interesting.
Yeah, certainly. That's obviously one of the very first pieces of feedback that we also got when we started developing the software about 6 years ago. So we soon realized that part of the process is a challenge, and like the place where we start is we provide tools for companies to kind of like figure out the different dimensions of a specific idea. So some of those can be like numeric and quantitative, but some of those are qualitative. So we want to have a healthy mix of discussion around the ideas on what the potential strengths or weaknesses of it are, but we also allow our users and customers to have to run specific tests that they can actually quantitatively measure regarding the idea. So that gives you that balance of trying to look at all the different aspects of an idea, which is really what like when you have an idea, it's really tough to turn that into an actual like really solid concept that will lead into innovation. So you kind of like need to take everything into account.
So from the work you were doing when you were developing out the system and the feedback that you were getting from the clients that you were working with, what were the actual challenges that they told you they're having, and that especially they may have thought that they had, but in reality, the challenge may have been something different? What did you find out about that?
Yeah, so the first piece was actually where I just started. So picking out the right ideas. You always have more ideas than you can implement. So choosing the right ideas was kind of like what everybody was really focused on in the beginning. And that's certainly true. You want to work on ideas that actually have potential, but then that's just still the beginning, because you like coming up with an idea is the easy part. And that's where the real work starts. So you kind of like have to iteratively develop the ideas for them to become innovations. And then it's really rare that anybody would get it right on the first try. So you kind of like have to have that culture and the process for actually turning those ideas into innovations. So like figuring out that process and figuring out the right structures for enabling those ideas is really like a crucial part.
And what sort of processes and structures do you think work? What sort of helps companies do that more effectively?
I think like the main piece there is that you can't just like do the exercise on paper. You have to test the ideas out in the real world, and that's like the common denominator with all of the different processes. We work with all kinds of companies on all kinds of innovations. So some of them are working on really incremental things, and some of them might be working on big, new, disruptive business ideas. And obviously the processes have to be really different for those different kinds of ideas. For some of the incremental ones, something that's really lightweight and then allows you to put things quickly into practice is the right way to proceed. But with like those disruptive ideas, you have to kind of like go step by step and validate some of the assumptions that you have regarding the idea and the business model behind it and the technology involved in it and all the different aspects that go into it.
So let's talk a bit about the system itself and the types of companies you're working with. Is it predominantly sort of young startups, tech companies, or is this something that larger, more established companies can also use?
Certainly, I think like the vast majority of our customers are actually medium to large organizations. So it's not something that's just aimed at the startups of the world. I think like, well, from the very early phases, we had a lot of different kinds of customers from different industries. So we kind of like had to build the system to be as flexible as possible to accommodate the needs of all of those customers, while still keeping it really simple for the end user to use and make it kind of like fun and engaging. So that's been the basis of how we built the system, and that has allowed us to kind of like work with all kinds of companies on that kind of like end of the spectrum.
And have you got any sort of stories about any companies that have really managed to change things up, especially if there's, I always find it interesting finding examples and case studies of companies that people might not necessarily expect to be very creative and innovative. Everyone's heard of the Amazons and the Googles as the shining light examples of innovation, but have you got any examples that you've worked with that might be a bit more surprising?
Yeah, I think one that I could share, or I can share with you a couple of examples that are kind of like a bit different and that could help you help some of the readers like see that it's not just the digital natives of the world that can innovate. So the first one is an insurance company here in the Nordics. They're the largest insurance company in the Nordics. And the way that they started using Viima was to kind of like collect ideas that their customer service representatives are basically getting from the calls that they field in the call center. They obviously get to see all of the different challenges that the customers are facing with their services. So that really provides them with a great like source of ideas. And the company then started a process of really systematically choosing the right ones to implement there. And they've already made thousands of changes to their services and introduced a number of new ones as well, based on the feedback that they got from there. And that's really helped them turn around their business and started like growing the business again, and made a really great transition, like from focusing on the customer experience and making thousands of those incremental improvements.
I mean, you hear that customer service, they're obviously the front lines hearing complaints from people. I'm always surprised that these insights aren't necessarily getting back into the company and into product development. I'm a big proponent of systems and methods and working structures where the input of what's frustrating people, customers, should be one of the main priorities of improvement, especially when it comes to incremental innovation.
Yeah. I think like one of the challenges there is that obviously when you're a large company and you have tons of people doing customer service for millions of customers, you often get focused on how effective the customer service people are at resolving those individual customer support cases, instead of looking at the bigger picture of preventing those cases in the first place. So just putting a little bit of time perhaps at the end of their shift to kind of like log some of those issues in there and systematically collecting those really helps you kind of like put in the effort to save a lot more time in the future.
Yeah, I mean, when you are on these calls and all you hear about is, oh, can you do a short serve at the end, which is effectively to find your net promoter score and whether or not the
Yeah.
issue is resolved, that doesn't necessarily prevent the same issue from happening again in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And the real challenge there is also like figuring out which are the really painful points and the ones that are actually something that tons of customers are facing and not just the most vocal ones. So kind of like getting the feel of that as well.
Now, another thing I wanted to check with you is I've had discussions with software companies who all try to fix innovation purely through software. What's been your experience with the balance between providing people with a tool to fix their issues and the cultural, structural mindset things happening within the company that might be preventing that tool from being used to its full potential?
I think those always go hand in hand. So the way we have to think about it is that to succeed, the companies need to have the right tools in place. They need to have the right structures in place, the right people in place, and obviously without having all of those different pieces together, it's really hard to succeed in innovation. So you kind of like have to have all of the different pieces in the puzzle together for the whole structure to work. And obviously a software or any kind of tool for that matter is just one part of the puzzle. So the way we like to see it is that the tool can serve as the backbone for like building those other things on top of, and that's kind of like why a lot of our customers have really found it helpful to kind of like take that tool into use and then start building those other aspects of their innovation capabilities on top of the platform. But it's certainly not something that will fix things in and of itself.
I'd be interested to find your perspective on what of these other capabilities, apart from the processes and the software, which of those have you found really unlocks innovation within companies?
I think it's a bit of a cliche, but culture really does matter, and that's I think something that we hear all the time is that a lot of really capable like people within larger organizations really struggle when the organization doesn't have that innovative culture in place, and then they kind of like get stuck on not being able to make progress without having the right culture in place. But then again, the kind of like right culture won't turn around if you don't really try to solve that problem. So the way that we recommend our customers to approach that is that they do it both top down and bottom up. So they do all of these small like initiatives that really help drive the right kind of culture and help turn it around. But they also need to get the top management to support and basically encourage that kind of an atmosphere and culture to be turned around in the company.
Have you got maybe one example of both ways that you've seen it been done successfully? One example of a good bottom-up initiative and one example of a good effective top-down initiative?
Well, like for the like if we take the example that I already gave you about that, what they did was that their top management really said that one of their core strategic initiatives is to focus on improving the customer service, like just really putting a lot of effort into improving all facets that go into it. And that kind of like helps everyone in the company know that this is really important and something we have to figure out. And it's not specifically even about being innovative. It's about like making changes and improving that aspect of the business. And then they introduce at the same time from the other side, they make sure that the employees know that it's their responsibility to also drive that same progress forward. So that's kind of like why they introduced our tool. And then they have these other meetings on top of that where their teams think about these things, and kind of like you have this you basically look at the big picture and then you cascade all of the goals down level by level until you have that in sync across the whole organization. So that's what really drives change actually in the culture as well.
And as a parting thought, I know we're coming up to the end of the interview now, but I'd be interested to get your perspective within your own company and your own system. What sort of innovations are you working on? What's coming up next?
Sure. So one of the things that we've heard a number of times from the people who are responsible for innovation within their organizations is that they have a hard time of convincing their management to maybe continue investing into innovation, or at least to kind of like bring in more resources for doing that job. So they might not have really the resources to turn around the company at large, but of course the management doesn't necessarily have any rational reasons for doing that if the innovation team isn't able to do any kind of like measurable results with the resources that they currently have. So that's one of the areas where we're looking to build the software into the future. So we have a new feature coming up that allows companies to more systematically track the value that's coming out of their innovation work, which helps then convince management that this is something that they really need to invest in. But also that really helps you kind of like figure out what has worked for you in the past and what might be something that you need to improve on in the future. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we have coming up in the very short term.
Fascinating. Jesse, it's been wonderful speaking with you. If people want to find out more about you and your company, what's the best way for them to go about that?
Sure. So Viima.com is our website address. You can sign up for our tool for free. It's free for up to 50 users. So you can get started and see how it works in practice if you think it's interesting. So go check out our website and then see if that's something that would work for you. And then we're most active in LinkedIn. So you can find our company from LinkedIn, and I'm also there myself. So those are great places to be in touch if you want to discuss.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get those links down in the description below. Jesse, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Thanks, Nick. My pleasure.
Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode.